The dusty main street fell silent when the Apache girl's voice cut through the heat. "Rancher, what's that snake moving inside your pants?" she asked, her eyes flashing with mischief. Laughter erupted from the bystanders, boots stomping on the boardwalk, while the rancher's face turned crimson. He had come swaggering to mock her, but in that moment, it was she who held the entire town in her palm. What followed, though, would shake Dry Creek to its core. Dry Creek was a place where pride weighed heavier than bullets, and insults often left scars deeper than wounds. That morning, the town stirred with its usual rhythm, wagons creaking along the street, blacksmiths hammering iron, and cowboys swaggering between the saloon and the general store. Among them was Thomas Riggs, a rancher known as much for his wealth as for his arrogance. He owned more cattle than any man in the valley, and he made sure everyone knew it. He carried himself like a king, spurs ringing, hat tilted, always quick with a cruel joke at another's expense. When Ayanna, the young Apache girl, arrived in town with her basket of woven goods, Riggs saw an easy target. She walked tall despite the stares, her braids catching the light, her eyes calm and steady. Where others looked at her with suspicion, Riggs looked with scorn and opportunity. He leaned against a post, voice loud enough for the street to hear. "Well now, what's this? Dry Creek letting wild girls trade like civilized folk. Next thing we know, they'll be running the saloon." A few men chuckled, eager to stay in his favor, but Ayanna didn't falter. She laid her basket on the store's steps, straightened, and let her gaze lock on his. Her words came sharp, clear enough to slice the air. "Rancher, what's that snake moving inside your pants?" The street froze for half a heartbeat, then erupted. Some laughed until their sides hurt, others gasped in shock, and a few muttered darkly, fearing what would come next. Riggs stiffened, his swagger collapsing into rage as his face reddened. His hand twitched toward his belt, but he stopped himself. Even he knew better than to strike in the open. Ayanna didn't press further. She simply gathered her goods again, her expression calm, her eyes unflinching. That calmness stung worse than her words. It marked him not as feared, but as mocked. And in a town like Dry Creek, humiliation could be deadlier than a bullet. The laughter rang longer than Riggs could stand. Every chuckle, every smirk on the boardwalk struck him harder than any fist. His swagger, his carefully cultivated image as Dry Creek's untouchable rancher, crumbled under the weight of the Apache girl's single sentence. Riggs forced a laugh, brittle and hollow, his hand adjusting the belt she had mocked. "That tongue of yours is quick," he said loudly, trying to regain ground. "But quick tongues get people into trouble." The crowd shifted, sensing the danger. A few cowboys muttered approval, but most watched in silence, waiting to see what would happen next. Ayanna stood calm, her hands resting lightly on her basket, her gaze steady on him. She didn't answer. That silence cut deeper than her insult had. It left Riggs exposed, swinging his fists at the air while she stood untouched. His pride burned hot. He stepped closer, boots grinding the dirt, his shadow stretching over her. "You think you've won something, girl?" His voice dropped low, sharp with venom. "All you've done is sign your own trouble." Sheriff Caldwell appeared from the saloon, his revolver resting loosely at his side. His mustache twitched as his eyes fixed on Riggs. "That's enough," he said flatly. "Leave it be." Riggs bristled, but the sheriff's stare was steady as iron. For a moment, pride wrestled with fear in his eyes. Then he forced another laugh, throwing his hands wide. "Don't fret, Sheriff, I wouldn't waste my time on such nonsense." He turned, striding toward the saloon with exaggerated swagger, but the crowd saw the cracks in his armor. Whispers followed him through the swinging doors. Ayanna gathered her goods and left the square without a word. Daniel Harper, a rancher of quieter means, tipped his hat as she passed. "You shamed him good," he murmured. Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "Truth shames itself, I only spoke it." Daniel watched her ride out of town, knowing the matter was far from closed. Inside the saloon, Riggs drowned his humiliation in whiskey. His men circled him, feeding his wounded pride. "She made you a fool in front of everyone. You let her cut you down with words. If you don't put her in her place, no one will respect you again." Riggs slammed his glass down, liquor spilling across the table. "Then I'll put her in her place," he snarled. "She wants to mock me in front of Dry Creek. I'll remind her what happens when you humiliate a man with land, cattle, and power." His men nodded eagerly, but one shifted uneasily. "Careful, Tom. The sheriff won't stand for blood in the street," Riggs sneered. "Then I won't take her in the street." His eyes narrowed. voice turning cold. "I'll take her where the sheriff ain't looking, on her land, in the dark, where no law reaches." That night, Ayana sat by her fire, the desert wind rustling through the grass. Her aunt watched her in silence before finally speaking. "You cut a man's pride, child. Pride bleeds longer than flesh. He will come." Ayana's fingers brushed over the weave in her basket. "Then let him. I will not bow." Her aunt's eyes, lined with years of struggle, softened with worry. "Strength is not only in standing alone. Remember that." But Ayana said nothing more. The next morning, the town hummed with rumor. Some praised her courage. "Never seen Riggs look so small," a shopkeeper whispered with a grin. Others shook their heads in fear. "She's cursed him. And when a man like that is cursed, he curses everyone around him." Children mimicked her words in the dust, laughing. Ranch hands chuckled behind Riggs's back, and each laugh was a thorn in his pride, driving him closer to the edge. By midday, Riggs stormed into the blacksmith shop, slamming a fist on the anvil where Jonah Price worked. Sparks leapt into the air. "You were there," Riggs barked. "You laughed. You think that girl's brave. She's nothing. Next time she comes, she'll learn what happens when you shame Thomas Riggs." Jonah's hammer struck the iron hard, his voice steady. "Maybe it's you who'll learn, Mr. Riggs." The rancher's face flushed. He nearly drew his whip but stopped himself, muttering curses as he stormed out. By sundown, everyone in Dry Creek knew one thing. Riggs wouldn't let the insult go. His pride was too deep, his power too wide, his fury too sharp. And Ayana, calm as stone, had lit a fire that would spread far beyond one dusty street. Riggs had been humiliated, and Dry Creek knew he would strike back. The only question was how and when. Thomas Riggs didn't sleep that night. He paced the floorboards of his ranch house like a wolf in a cage, whiskey burning in his gut, the echo of Ayana's words clawing at his pride. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing calm and unshaken, while the town laughed at him. That single moment had undone years of swagger, and Riggs knew one truth: he could not allow it to stand. By dawn, his men found him saddling his horse, eyes bloodshot, jaw set. "We ride tonight," he muttered, shoving a rifle into his saddlebag. One of his foremen frowned. "For her. You sure it's wise? Sheriff's already watching you close." Riggs's teeth ground together. "Sheriff can't be everywhere, and she humiliated me in front of my own town. If I don't break her, I'm finished. No rancher, no cowboy, no drifter will ever respect me again." His men exchanged uneasy glances. Some shared his thirst for vengeance, others his fear of shame. All of them knew Riggs's temper. Once lit, it burned until something or someone was reduced to ash. Back in the valley, Ayana tended her small plot of land, her aunt gathering herbs nearby. The morning sun rose bright, but the air felt heavier than usual. Even the wind carried unease, as though it whispered of storms to come. Daniel Harper rode in, dismounting with a frown. Word is, Riggs was up all night, drinking and ranting. "Folks say he's fixing to make trouble." Ayana looked up from the basket she was weaving, her hands steady. "Trouble comes whether invited or not. Better to be ready when it knocks." Daniel shook his head, frustration biting his tone. "This isn't just trouble. Riggs is rich, he's got men, he's got the sheriff's patience worn thin already. You cut his pride. He won't stop until he gets it back." Her aunt's voice cut in, sharp but worried. "Then leave. Go where his pride can't follow. You don't owe this town a fight." But Ayana only shook her head. "If I run, his pride wins. And tomorrow, he'll set his eyes on the next to mock. Better I stand, so they know fear can be faced." Daniel stared at her, admiration warring with fear. He wanted to argue, but the calm in her eyes silenced him. In town, the tension grew thicker. Riggs strutted through the saloon, slamming coins on the counter, buying rounds for anyone who'd listen. His voice carried over the clatter of glasses. "She thinks she can shame me and walk away," he barked. "I'll teach her. I'll show this town what happens when you cross Thomas Riggs." Some men laughed nervously, others nodded, eager to stay on his good side, but a few slipped out quietly, their faces pale. By evening, whispers reached Sheriff Caldwell. The sheriff found Riggs outside the stables, cinching his saddle. "You planning a ride?" Caldwell asked, voice low but sharp. Riggs's jaw tightened. "Not your concern. It becomes my concern when I hear you're fixing to stir trouble," Caldwell said. His revolver rested easy at his side face, but his mustache twitched with steel. "Leave the girl be, Riggs. She shamed you, so what? Words ain't worth blood," Riggs sneered. "Easy for you to say. You weren't the one laughed at like a fool. If I don't answer her, I'm done." Caldwell stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You answer her, and you'll be done all right. In a grave or in my cell. Think carefully, Riggs." The sheriff walked away, but he knew his warning had fallen on deaf ears. That night, Ayanna heard the distant sound of hooves in the dark. She rose from her blanket, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. The sound faded, but the message was clear. Riggs was circling, waiting for his chance. Her aunt touched her arm. "He'll come soon, and he won't come alone." Ayanna nodded, her voice steady. "Then let him come. I will not hide." By morning, the town was buzzing. Some said Riggs had ridden toward the valley. Others swore they saw his men scouting the ridges. Fear spread quickly. Shopkeepers whispered of closing early. Mothers pulled children indoors. Some townsfolk muttered that Ayanna had brought this storm on them, that her words had cursed them all. Daniel argued with a group by the well. "She only spoke truth. Riggs brought this on himself. You'd blame her for standing when the rest of you bowed." The rancher who had once tried to rope her spat into the dust. "Truth don't matter when a man like Riggs is riled. She should have held her tongue." Daniel's fists clenched, but Ayanna appeared, her voice calm. "If a tongue must be held to save pride, then truth dies with it." Her words silenced the crowd, but the fear in their eyes remained. That evening, Riggs gathered 6 of his men at the edge of his ranch. Lanterns flickered as he mounted his horse, his face carved with fury. "Tonight we ride," he growled. "She thinks she's untouchable. We'll remind her she ain't." His men shifted, some uneasy, but none dared defy him. They rode into the desert, their torches glowing like snakes winding toward her land. From her porch, Ayanna watched the glow of approaching torches. Riggs was coming, and this time, words would not be enough. The desert night was black as coal, the stars half hidden behind a haze of dust. Ayanna stood on her porch, her rifle across her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't move when the first flicker of torchlight appeared, nor when it multiplied into 6 glowing embers crawling through the dark. Her aunt whispered from inside, voice tight with fear. "They come, child. Close the door. Bar it." But Ayanna shook her head. "Doors don't stop fire. Better I meet it in the open." The torches grew closer, their light bouncing on the figures of mounted men. Hooves thudded, muffled in the sand until the riders fanned out before her land. At their head, Thomas Riggs sat tall in the saddle, his face shadowed but his grin cruel. "Well, there she is," he called, his voice carrying. "The snake-tongued girl who thought she could shame a rancher. Thought you'd hide out here and be safe, 'cause did you?" Ayanna rose to her feet, the rifle steady in her hands. "I did not hide. You came crawling," the men muttered, shifting in their saddles. Riggs laughed, though the sound rang hollow. "Bold words, but bold don't mean smart. You think anyone'll protect you? Sheriff ain't here. Your neighbors won't lift a hand. It's just you and me." Daniel's voice cut the night. "Not just her." He stepped from the shadows, shotgun aimed square at Riggs. Jonah followed, his hammer gleaming in the torchlight. 2 against 6 wasn't much, but their stance was steady. Riggs's grin faltered. "So she's got pets now? You boys think you're heroes?" Jonah's voice cracked with youth, but his eyes blazed. "Heroes stand. Cowards ride in the dark." For a moment, silence stretched. Then Riggs snapped his fingers. 2 of his men dismounted, ropes in hand. "Take her. Leave the boys breathing for now." The men advanced, boots crunching against the sand. Ayanna raised her rifle, voice calm but cold. "One more step and you'll crawl back to your horse without a hand to hold the reins." They hesitated, but Riggs barked, "Do it!" The first lunged forward, only to fall as her shot cracked, the rope dropping from his fingers. Dust rose, his scream echoing as he clutched his bleeding shoulder. The night exploded. Daniel's shotgun thundered, scattering the riders. Jonah swung his hammer into the ribs of the second man, sending him sprawling. Riggs cursed, drawing his revolver, firing into the dark. Bullets ripped splinters from the porch, glass shattered behind Ayanna, but she didn't flinch. Her aunt screamed from inside. "Ayanna!" "I'm here," she called back, voice steady. Another shot rang, another outlaw thrown from his saddle. Riggs's fury boiled. He spurred his horse forward, aiming straight for her. Daniel fired, grazing the animal's flank, forcing it to rear. Riggs tumbled into the dust, his revolver skidding out of reach. He staggered to his knees, dirt and rage staining his face. Ayanna stepped down from the porch, rifle aimed at his chest. "It ends here, Riggs," she said. He spat blood, sneering. "Then pull the trigger, or are you all talk?" For a heartbeat, she considered it, but her eyes were calm. Killing you would only feed your pride. Better you crawl back to town broken, with everyone knowing you failed." Riggs's face twisted with hate. Behind him, the remaining men scrambled onto their horses, dragging the wounded with them. Their torches fled into the night, leaving only smoke and silence. Daniel lowered his shotgun, his breath ragged. "You should have finished him." Ayanna shook her head. "The desert finishes men like Riggs. Pride rots faster than flesh." Jonah wiped blood from his cheek, still gripping his hammer. "He won't stop. Not after this." Her gaze was steady on the dark horizon. "Then let him come again. I will not bow." The next morning, Dry Creek buzzed with rumor. Some swore Riggs had been shot like a dog. Others whispered that the Apache Girl had bewitched him. The sheriff heard it all, his face grim. "He won't let this go," Caldwell muttered, holstering his revolver. "And next time, he'll bring more than 6. Riggs had been driven back, humiliated twice, but pride wounded twice is deadlier than any bullet, and the next strike would not come quietly. Riggs limped back into Dry Creek at dawn, his shirt torn, dust caked to his face, blood dried along his temple. His men rode silently behind him, 2 wounded, 1 barely conscious. They looked less like victors than whipped dogs, and the town saw it. Whispers spread like wildfire. "She drove them off. 1 girl and 2 men against Riggs and his crew. Maybe she's cursed." By the time Riggs stumbled into the saloon, the laughter had already begun. A group of cowhands raised their mugs, chuckling. "How's that Apache girl treating you, Tom? Heard she's got a steadier aim than you." Riggs slammed his fist into the nearest table, rattling glasses. "Shut your mouths!" he roared, but the smirks didn't vanish. Humiliation burned hotter than his wounds. He ordered whiskey, gulped it down, and slammed the glass. His men sat in silence, heads low. Pride was all Riggs had left, and even that was bleeding out. That afternoon, he stormed into the general store, demanding bandages. The shopkeeper's wife whispered as she wrapped his arm, "You should leave it be, Mr. Riggs. She's not alone anymore." The sheriff and Daniel, even young Jonah. "People are starting to see her as a sign." Riggs jerked his arm back, snarling. "A sign of what? Rebellion?" The woman lowered her gaze but didn't answer. That silence stung worse than her words. By evening, Riggs gathered his closest allies in the saloon's back room. Oil lamps flickered against the walls as he paced like a caged bull. "She shamed me twice," he growled. "Ran us off our horses like cowards. Now the whole town whispers, if I let this stand, I'm finished." One of his men shifted nervously. "Maybe let it cool, Tom. Folks are starting to look at her different. Some say she's the only one who's ever stood against you." Riggs slammed his palm on the table. "That's exactly why she's dangerous. She's turning them against me. You don't beat that with silence. You crush it with fire." A burly rancher leaned forward. "And how do you plan to do that? Caldwell's breathing down your neck. You lay a hand on her again, he'll throw you in irons." Riggs's grin was sharp, his eyes cold. "Then we make it bigger. She's not just an Apache girl anymore. She's a threat to every rancher, every merchant, every man who believes Dry Creek belongs to us. We paint her as the enemy, and the town itself will hand her to me." The plan spread quickly, whispered in bars and barns. Riggs claimed Ayanna was stirring rebellion, that she wanted to take land from honest ranchers, that her defiance would bring ruin on them all. Some believed him. Fear was fertile soil. Men muttered that maybe Riggs was right. Maybe the girl's pride would bring Doyle's old gang sniffing back, or worse. Mothers fretted over their children's safety, whispering that trouble followed her like a shadow, but others shook their heads. She only defended herself. "Riggs brought this on himself," Daniel argued loudest, refusing to let her name be dragged through the dust. "She's done nothing but stand tall, and some of you hate her for that because you never stood at all." Jonah was even fiercer. "If you let Riggs poison you, you're cowards twice over. Once for bowing to him, and again for turning on the only one who stood." The town split sharper than before. Lines were drawn not by family or trade, but by fear and pride. Sheriff Caldwell watched it unfold with a grim face. He confronted Riggs in the street, voice low but dangerous. "You're stirring poison. You'll tear this town apart." Riggs smirked, his bandaged arm tucked close. "I don't need to tear it, Sheriff. It's already splitting. And when it breaks, they'll thank me for cutting out the rot." Caldwell's hand twitched near his revolver. "You keep this up, Tom, and you won't need her bullet. You'll have mine." But Riggs only tipped his hat mockingly and strode off, his men trailing behind. That night, Ayanna felt the change in the air. She rode into town to trade. But where once there had been whispers of curiosity, now there were narrowed eyes, mutters just loud enough for her to hear. "She's dangerous." She's bringing fire on us. She ought to leave before it's too late. Daniel walked beside her, jaw clenched, daring anyone to step forward. Jonah trailed, hammer at his belt, his young face fierce. Ayanna ignored the stares, her steps calm, her gaze unbroken. But inside, she knew Riggs had found a new weapon, fear, and fear spread faster than bullets. Back at her farm, her aunt tended the fire, her hands shaking slightly. He's turned them, child. The town will not stand with you forever. Ayanna set her basket down, her voice steady. Then let them stand where they choose. I will not run. Her aunt looked at her long, then nodded slowly. Then you must be ready. The next time he comes, it will not be with 6 men in the dark. It will be with half the town in the open. Riggs's pride had found allies in fear. The next storm would not come as a raid in the night, but as a march in daylight, with Dry Creek itself caught in the middle. Morning light spilled over Dry Creek, but instead of warming the town, it exposed the cracks that Riggs had carved deeper with every whisper. The saloon filled early, not with laughter but with tense voices. Ranchers leaned over tables, merchants whispered near the bar, and Riggs sat in the center like a spider in its web. She's dangerous, he said, his voice calm but sharp. First she mocked me, then she shot my men, and now she thinks she owns the right to stand against anyone she pleases. You think she'll stop at me? No, she'll come for you next, for your land, for your pride, for everything that makes Dry Creek ours. Some men nodded, fear etched in their faces. One muttered, Sheriff won't stop her. He's already siding with her. Riggs seized on it. Exactly. The law's bent. If we don't protect our own, and who will? The sheriff's gone soft. Daniel Harper's already bewitched, and that boy Jonah, he's nothing but her puppet. This is our fight. A murmur of agreement rose. The seed of fear he planted was sprouting fast. At the same time, Daniel was at the smithy, his voice ringing as he tried to counter the poison. You all know the truth. Riggs rode to her farm in the dead of night. He brought torches, guns, and ropes. She defended herself, nothing more. You damn her for not bowing to him. That's not justice, that's cowardice. Jonah slammed his hammer against the anvil, sparks flying. She stood when none of you did. That's what you hate, that she showed your fear. If you let Riggs turn you, you'll be slaves to him before you even notice. A few nodded, but most looked away, unwilling to meet their eyes. Fear made their spines bend, and Riggs's voice sounded easier than courage. Sheriff Caldwell tried to hold the balance, but even he felt the tide turning. At the church steps, he addressed the crowd. You listen to Riggs, you'll tear this town apart. You think handing her over will bring you peace? It won't. Doyle's gone, but there'll always be another like him. If you give in now, you'll never stop giving. But his words rang against stone. Too many faces looked away. Too many hands clutched children, muttering that safety mattered more than pride. That evening, Ayanna rode into town with a basket of herbs, her aunt at her side. The street froze as she dismounted. Mothers pulled children inside. Shopkeepers ducked their heads. A group of men outside the saloon sneered openly. Best you ride on, one called. You've brought enough fire here already. Daniel stepped forward instantly, his voice hard. She's done nothing but live. If you've got a quarrel, it's with Riggs, not her. Another rancher spat into the dust. Easy for you to say. You've got no family to protect. We can't fight her battles forever. Ayanna's voice cut through the tension, calm but firm. I asked no one to fight for me. I will not bow and I will not run. But if you would hand me over, do it with your own hands, not behind whispers. The street fell silent. No one moved. That calmness unsettled them more than anger ever could. Inside the saloon, Riggs watched through the window, his grin curling. He whispered to his men, see how they fear her. That's power. Soon they'll beg me to rid them of her. Back at her farm, her aunt's worry deepened. Child, you're standing alone now. Even those who once whispered thanks now whisper curses. Fear has turned them. Ayanna's hands rested on her rifle. Fear turns faster than the wind. But the wind always shifts again. Daniel shook his head. I don't like it. He's not just planning vengeance anymore. He's planning a purge. He'll come with more than men. He'll come with the town itself. Jonah slammed his hammer into the dirt. Then we'll show them again. Let them see with their own eyes who the coward is. Ayanna's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. Yes, but when they see, it may already be too late. That night, Riggs held another meeting in the saloon's back room. He spread a map of Dry Creek across the table, his finger stabbing at Ayanna's land. She lives here. too far for the sheriff to guard her every hour. We don't go as thieves this time. We go as men of Dry Creek, taking back what she's poisoned. She's no longer just a girl who mocked me. She's a threat to us all. And we'll show her the town won't be mocked." His men nodded, some with conviction, others with fear, but all trapped in his orbit. In the dark hours before dawn, Ayanna stood on her porch again, the desert wind cold on her face. Torches glowed faintly on the ridge, Riggs's men gathering once more. She whispered, more to herself than to her aunt behind her, "This time, he won't come alone. He'll come with Dry Creek itself." The church bell rang at midday, not for prayer but for assembly. By Riggs's demand, the town gathered in the square. He stood on the steps, arm still in a sling from the night Ayanna shot him, but his voice carried strong, laced with poison. "She mocks us. She defies us. And you all know she'll bring fire down on Dry Creek if we don't act. She already put bullets in your neighbors, and she'll put bullets in more. Ask yourselves, do we bow to an Apache Girl, or do we take back our town?" Murmurs rose, spreading like cracks in stone. Some nodded, their faces carved by fear. Others clenched fists, resisting the pull. Mothers clutched children, torn between safety and shame. Daniel Harper pushed through the crowd, shotgun slung across his shoulder. His voice rang sharp. "You lie, Riggs. Everyone here knows it. You rode to her land with ropes and torches." She defended herself, nothing more. "If there's shame, it's yours, not hers." Jonah stepped up beside him, hammer in hand. "She stood when you all bowed. That's why Riggs hates her, because she showed what he really is." Riggs's eyes burned, but his grin stayed cold. "And what about you, Daniel? What about you, boy? You ready to see your homes burned for her pride?" Voices in the crowd wavered. Some shouted, "Enough." Others muttered, "She should leave." The town was no longer whispering, it was splitting in daylight. Sheriff Caldwell strode forward, revolver at his hip. His mustache twitched with fury. "This ends now. You'll not turn this town into a mob, Riggs." Riggs spread his arms, mock innocence on his face. "Mob? I only give them a choice. If the law won't protect them, maybe they'll protect themselves." The sheriff's voice cut like steel. "Law's not for sale to your pride. Any man who rides with Riggs tonight rides against me." The crowd froze, the line drawn clear. By nightfall, the split was plain. Half the town huddled in homes, shutters barred. A few rode with Riggs, torches in hand, muttering they were protecting Dry Creek. Others slipped toward Ayanna's farm, bringing bread, water, or nothing but their presence, ashamed of how long they'd stayed silent. Daniel and Jonah stood guard at her fence, lanterns casting long shadows. The old blacksmith's hammer glinted like a weapon forged for truth. Ayanna sat by her fire, her face calm. She had seen this before, how fear turned neighbors into enemies. Her aunt's voice trembled as she tied herbs around the porch rail. "The town's tearing, child. Tonight they will choose, and whatever they choose, we will bear it." Ayanna's reply was steady, though her heart was heavy. "If they come with fire, let them see I do not run. If they come with hands to help, let them see I do not bend. I will not be moved by fear." Late into the night, the glow of torches appeared again on the ridge. This time it was not 6 riders, but near 20. Some Riggs's men, others townsfolk drawn into his orbit. Their voices carried angry and uncertain all at once. "Come out, girl," Riggs bellowed from the front. "This is Dry Creek's will. Leave this land or we'll drive you from it." Daniel's shotgun cracked the air, the shot splintering a post near Riggs's horse. "The only will here is yours, Riggs. You don't speak for this town." Jonah's voice rose behind him, fierce and trembling. "If you want her, come take her, but you'll crawl home the way you did last time." The torches wavered. Some men muttered, glancing at each other with doubt. Ayanna stepped forward into the firelight, her calm voice cutting through the night. "You say this is Dry Creek's will, then let Dry Creek choose with their own hands. If you would drive me out, then do it now. But know this, the day you do, you won't just hand me to Riggs, you'll hand him your souls." Her words hung heavy. Some men lowered their torches, shame flickering in their eyes, but Riggs snarled, furious at the hesitation. "Don't listen to her. She twists your fear into chains. She's nothing but trouble." "Trouble you started?" Daniel shouted back. The standoff stretched, breaths heavy, torches sputtering in the wind. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a woman's voice rose clear. "She's right. I won't raise a hand against her." One torch dropped into the dust, then another. Shame rippled through the line, splitting it like a blade. Riggs spun, furious. "Cowards! All of you!" his face twisted, pride rotting faster than flesh. "Fine. If you won't drive her out, I will." He spurred his horse forward, revolver flashing in the firelight. Riggs's horse thundered forward, hooves kicking up sparks from the hard-packed earth. His revolver gleamed in the firelight, arm raised, his face twisted in rage. For a moment, it looked as though nothing could stop him. Then Jonah leapt into his path, hammer in both hands. With a roar, he swung at the horse's foreleg. The animal reared, screaming, throwing Riggs sideways into the dirt. His revolver flew from his grasp, clattering near the boots of the very townsfolk he had riled. The crowd gasped. Some shouted for him to stop. Others cursed Jonah for daring to strike. In the chaos, Riggs scrambled to his knees, dust streaking his face, hatred blazing in his eyes. "She dies tonight," he bellowed, lunging toward his fallen revolver. But a boot pinned the gun to the ground before he could grasp it. Sheriff Caldwell stood there, revolver in hand, mustache twitching with fury, his voice cut like a whip. "Enough, Riggs. You've lost." Riggs froze, chest heaving, eyes darting between Caldwell's cold stare and the line of townsfolk now watching in silence. Some nodded in agreement, relieved someone had drawn a line. But others, those Riggs had poisoned most deeply, shouted in anger. "Sheriff's siding with her. He's protecting the Apache over his own. Riggs is right. She's a curse." The square fractured. A handful of men surged toward Riggs, lifting him up, urging him to fight on. Others backed away, torches dimming, shame in their eyes. Ayanna stood unmoved, her rifle at her side, her gaze steady. Her calm presence was a blade sharper than Riggs's rage. "You came with fire, and still you crawl," she said, her voice carrying. "How many times will you bleed your pride before you see it's already dead?" Riggs's face purpled. He tore free from the men holding him, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You think you've won? No. This town will never stand behind you. I'll see you burned out, even if it takes every man in Dry Creek." Caldwell's revolver pressed harder to his chest. "You'll see the inside of my jail if you draw one more breath like that." But the sheriff's deputies hesitated, glancing at the crowd. Some of the townsfolk muttered darkly, emboldened by Riggs's defiance. "She doesn't belong here. Better to let him finish it." The line between law and mob blurred dangerously. Daniel Harper stepped forward, shotgun steady. His voice was low but clear. "Anyone raises a hand against her, they answer to me." Jonah planted his hammer in the dirt, his young voice sharp. "And me." For a tense heartbeat, the night hung suspended. Two sides of Dry Creek stared each other down, those willing to defend Ayanna, and those too consumed by fear and pride to let go of Riggs's poison. Then a bottle smashed against a post, shattering the silence. A rancher shouted, "If the sheriff won't deal with her, we will." Chaos erupted. Some lunged toward Ayanna's camp. Others surged to block them. Caldwell fired a warning shot into the air, the crack splitting the night. "Stand down!" he roared, but it was too late. The spark had caught. Men grappled in the dust, fists flying, torches falling and scattering embers. Women screamed from doorways. Children sobbed in the shadows. The town itself was tearing apart in front of her. Through it all, Ayanna did not move. She raised her rifle once, not to fire, but to hold it firm across her chest. Her calm was a wall. She spoke, her voice cutting through the storm. "Look at yourselves. You fear me more than the man who came to burn your homes. You fight your own neighbors to protect his pride. Is this what Dry Creek has become?" The words struck like hammers. A few men froze, shame flickering in their eyes. But Riggs snarled louder, trying to drown her out. "Don't listen. She's twisting you. She'll ruin us all if we don't break her." Caldwell shoved him back hard, fury blazing at last. "You already ruined this town, Riggs, with your lies, your pride, your poison, not her." The fight faltered. Torches lay dying in the dirt. Men staggered back, panting, torn between rage and shame. Riggs stood trembling, caught between the sheriff's revolver and Ayanna's unflinching gaze. His pride screamed for blood, but for the first time, he saw hesitation in the faces around him. His power was slipping. The morning after the clash, Dry Creek wore its shame like a shroud. Broken bottles littered the square, scorch marks scarred the posts, and the church bell hung cracked from a stray bullet. No one spoke loudly. Voices were hushed, furtive, as though the town itself feared what it had become, but whispers traveled fast. At the general store, ranchers muttered that Ayanna had to go. "She's tearing us apart," one said, stacking sacks of flour. If she'd leave, maybe Riggs would calm down. A woman snapped back. "Riggs is the one who lit the fire. Don't you dare blame her." The argument spread like kindling. By midday, Dry Creek was divided in plain sight. Those who believed banishing Ayanna was the only way to restore peace, and those who saw her defiance as the town's last shred of dignity. Sheriff Caldwell called a meeting in the church, though half the pews sat empty. His voice was weary but firm. "I won't sugarcoat it. This town's hanging by a thread. Riggs wants her gone, and too many of you think that'll fix things. But I tell you, drive her out, and you hand him everything. Today it's her, tomorrow it's you." Murmurs filled the air. One rancher stood, fists clenched. "Sheriff, we've got children hiding under beds at night. How many more times do we bleed for her pride?" Daniel Harper rose sharply, his shotgun slung across his back. "It's not her pride, it's ours. You think giving her up buys you safety. Riggs won't stop there. He'll bleed this town dry until no one stands left to oppose him." The church roared with overlapping voices, fear and fury clashing like steel. Some shouted to cast her out, others to stand beside her. Caldwell fired a shot into the rafters, the crack silencing them. His mustache bristled as he spoke. "This ain't about her anymore. It's about what kind of town you want to be, one that bows or one that stands." Outside, Riggs listened from the shadows. His sling was gone, his wrist bound in rough cloth, his fury sharper than ever. He smirked as he watched neighbors shouting against neighbors. This was his victory, even without drawing blood. That night, he gathered a smaller group, those most loyal, most fearful. "The sheriff's cracking, the town's cracking. One more push and they'll break. Tomorrow, we ride not as thieves in the dark, but as the will of Dry Creek itself. We'll drag her out in daylight, and no one will dare stand in our way." His men nodded, though unease lingered in their eyes. Meanwhile, Ayanna sat at her fire, her aunt grinding herbs in silence. The old woman's voice finally broke. "They will turn on you, child. Even those who defended you yesterday may curse you tomorrow. Fear is fickle." Ayanna's eyes stayed on the flames. "Then let them turn. I will not move." Jonah slammed his hammer into the dirt beside him. "If they come, we'll fight them too." Daniel shook his head grimly. "This isn't just Riggs anymore. It's the town, and a town's harder to fight than any outlaw." Ayanna looked up, her gaze steady. "I am not fighting a town. I am fighting its fear, and fear is beaten not with bullets, but with truth." The next morning, tension bled into every corner of Dry Creek. Families avoided each other on the boardwalk. Shopkeepers eyed customers with suspicion. At the well, two women nearly came to blows, one calling Ayanna a curse, the other calling Riggs a coward. By noon, Riggs made his move. He rode into town with a dozen men, faces hard, torches unlit but ready. He stopped in the square, shouting for all to hear. "This ends today. Dry Creek will not be ruled by an Apache girl. We take her now, and we take back our town." A cheer rose from some, frightened, desperate, eager for the promise of peace. Others shook their heads, refusing to join. The division was no longer hidden. It split the square clean in two. Sheriff Caldwell marched out, revolver at his side. "You try it, Riggs, and you'll answer to me." Riggs grinned, his voice sharp as a blade. "Then you'll answer to Dry Creek, Sheriff. Let the town decide, her or us." Ayanna appeared then, walking into the square with Daniel and Jonah flanking her. Her calm presence cut through the noise. She raised her voice, not loud but steady enough for all to hear. "You say I am the curse. Then curse me to my face. But do not hide behind Riggs's pride. If you want me gone, let your own hands drag me out. And if you want me here, then stand beside me now. Tonight, you choose." The square fell silent. Torches wavered. Men glanced at each other, caught between fear and shame. Women pulled their children close, torn. Riggs raised his arm, signaling his men to seize her, but hesitation rippled through the crowd, some stepping forward, others back, the line uncertain. Dry Creek stood on the edge of its choice. One step, and the town would either betray her to Riggs or defy him at last. The silence in the square stretched so long that even the horses stamped nervously, sensing the weight of the moment. Ayanna stood still, her braid falling over one shoulder, her eyes fixed not on Riggs but on the people of Dry Creek. "Choose," she repeated, her voice calm as stone. Riggs sneered. "She dares you, and you stand frozen like children. Show her what this town's made of." He pointed at two ranchers near the front, men he had often bought drinks for in the saloon. "You, drag her out." The ranchers shifted, their eyes darting. One stepped forward. hands trembling as he reached toward Ayana's arm. But before he could touch her, Daniel's shotgun cracked, blasting dust at his boots. "You take one more step," Daniel growled, "and you'll learn what happens when you side with a coward." The rancher stumbled back, face pale. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some gasped in fear, others shouted in anger. "She's bringing blood on us," a woman cried, clutching her child. "She's the only one standing for us," another answered fiercely. The square erupted. Half the crowd surged toward Riggs, their fear demanding action. The other half stood firm near Ayana, rifles raised, jaws clenched with defiance. Jonah leapt onto the trough, hammer in hand, his young voice breaking but loud. "You want to hand her over? Then hand me too, because I'll stand in front of her till I can't stand at all." The boy's words struck sparks. A few farmers who had hung back stepped forward, their old rifles shaking but raised. Riggs snarled, fury burning in his eyes. "Fine. If you won't give her to me, I'll take her myself." He spurred his horse, charging again. This time, more men followed, his loyal ones, their torches flaring in the dusk. Caldwell fired his revolver high, his voice booming. "Back down, Riggs. The law's against you." But Riggs's laughter cut through the smoke. "Law? The law's a joke if it protects her." The clash came sudden and brutal. Men grabbed rifles, others fists, and in seconds the square became a storm. Torches swung like clubs. Women screamed. Glass shattered as a stray bullet tore through the saloon's window. Ayana didn't fire at first. She held her rifle steady, using her voice instead. "Stop this madness! You're tearing your own town apart!" But her words were drowned by the roar of pride and fear colliding. Daniel fought like a wall, his shotgun knocking men back, his fists flying when the gun was empty. Jonah swung his hammer with desperate strength, shattering torches, driving Riggs's men stumbling into the dust. Caldwell and his deputies tried to restore order, but even they were swallowed by the tide. The sheriff's mustache bristled as he shouted, "You're fighting your own neighbors, damn you!" Through the chaos, Riggs pushed forward, revolver back in hand. He aimed at Ayana, his face twisted with hate. This ends now. But before he could fire, a farmer, one of those who had once muttered against her, threw himself between them. The shot tore through his shoulder, dropping him to the ground. He looked up at Ayana, pain etched on his face. Don't bow." Her heart clenched, but her eyes stayed steady. She raised her rifle at last and fired. The bullet struck the revolver clean from Riggs's hand, sending it spinning into the dirt. Gasps echoed through the square. For a heartbeat, even the chaos froze. Riggs stared at his empty hand, fury and fear warring in his eyes. "You," he sputtered. Ayana's voice cut him off, sharp and clear. "No more. You came for me in the dark. You came with the town at your back, and still you crawl in the dust. Look around you, Riggs. Your pride has torn Dry Creek apart." The townsfolk looked, and shame rippled through them. Fathers dragging neighbors to the ground froze. Mothers clutching children in fear lowered their eyes. Some dropped their torches, their weapons, as the truth burned hotter than fire. But Riggs, too far gone, screamed in rage. He lunged bare-handed at her, only to be tackled by Jonah, the boy's hammer striking his ribs. Riggs collapsed, wheezing, spitting blood into the dirt. The fight sputtered. Without Riggs's fury driving them, his men faltered. Some fled, others dropped their weapons, muttering curses. But the square was scarred. Neighbors glared at neighbors. Brothers had fought brothers, and Dry Creek's soul was split wide open. Riggs lay on the ground, coughing dust and blood, but his eyes still burned with the fire of a man who refused to admit defeat. Caldwell kept his revolver steady on him, the townsfolk holding their breath. For a moment it seemed the fight was done. Then Riggs laughed. It was hoarse, ugly, but loud enough to cut the silence. "You think this is over? Look around you. You're already tearing each other apart. I don't need a bullet to kill this town. You're doing it for me." The words stung like sparks in dry grass. Faces hardened, some turning toward Ayana with suspicion again, others toward Riggs with disgust. The line between them grew sharper, not weaker. Daniel stepped forward, shotgun still smoking. "You're finished, Riggs. The town sees you for what you are now." Riggs's grin widened through the blood. "Does it? Or does it see her? The curse who brought this storm on your heads, who made neighbors fight like enemies?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others nodded grimly, fear clinging stubborn as weeds. Sheriff Caldwell barked, "Enough! "One more word, Riggs, and I'll shut your mouth myself." But Riggs knew the seed was planted. Even as the sheriff's deputies dragged him toward the jail, he shouted over his shoulder, "This town don't belong to her. If you want your family safe, you know where to find me. Tomorrow night, we finish it." The next day, Dry Creek was a ghost town. Doors stayed bolted, curtains drawn. Children were hushed indoors, mothers watching with wide eyes, fathers torn between fear and fury. The square bore the scars of the fight, blood in the dust, broken torches, a silence heavier than church bells. At the saloon, Riggs held court again, his wrist bound, ribs aching, but his voice sharp as ever. Men gathered around, desperate for certainty. "She's poison," he hissed. "So long as she stands, this town will never know peace. Caldwell's too weak, Daniel's bewitched, that boy Jonah's a fool. If we wait, she'll make herself queen of Dry Creek. You want your lives back? You want your children safe? Ride with me tonight, and we end her for good." Some nodded quickly, fear outweighing reason. Others hesitated, shame heavy in their eyes. But Riggs pressed harder, feeding their fear like dry wood to a flame. "If she can mock me, ruin me, drive me to the dirt, what makes you think she won't do the same to you? She won't stop until you all bow, and by then, it'll be too late." Meanwhile, Daniel and Jonah worked to rally those still willing to stand. At the smithy, Jonah hammered iron into spikes, his face grim. "He's gathering them again. I can hear it. Some men who dropped their torches last night will pick them up again tonight." Daniel nodded, jaw tight. "Fear's a stubborn disease, but we've got to show them it can be cured. If we back down now, Riggs wins even if he never fires another shot." Sheriff Caldwell joined them, weary but resolute. "I'll stand with you, but know this, if the town itself rides against us, there'll be no law, no sides, no saving Dry Creek, only ruin." Ayanna listened in silence, her hands resting on her rifle. At last, she spoke. "Then let it be ruin. Better the truth burn this place to ash than fear rot it hollow, but I will not leave." Her words steadied them, though the weight of them pressed heavy on all. That night, the glow of torches returned. More this time, nearly 30 men, a mix of Riggs's ranch hands and townsfolk who had chosen fear over pride. They gathered outside the saloon, Riggs at their head, his face pale but eyes blazing. "This is it," he shouted. "Tonight we ride, and by dawn this town is ours again. No more whispers, no more curses, only Dry Creek the way it should be." Cheers rose, though they were hollow, trembling. Men who wanted to believe, men too afraid not to. Together, they turned their horses toward the valley where Ayanna's farm stood, torches burning like a river of fire in the dark. At her farm, Ayanna was already waiting. Daniel stood at her right, Jonah at her left, Caldwell just behind. A handful of townsfolk had come too, those who had chosen courage over fear, their rifles shaking but their boots planted firm. The horizon glowed with the coming storm. Torches swayed like angry stars, voices carrying across the desert wind. Her aunt whispered from the doorway, voice breaking, "Child, they come with the whole town now." Ayanna's eyes never left the ridge. Her voice was calm. "Then the whole town will see who stands and who bows." The riders approached, 30 strong, their torches painting the night with fire. Riggs had turned half the town into his weapon. By dawn, Dry Creek itself would be at war, with its soul hanging in the balance. The desert night glowed with fire as Riggs's riders thundered down from the ridge. 30 torches swayed, their flames bending in the wind like serpents hungry for prey. The sound of hooves rolled like thunder across the valley, shaking the earth beneath Ayanna's farm. Ayanna stood in the yard, rifle across her chest, Daniel and Jonah flanking her. Caldwell was just behind, his revolver drawn, his deputies tense but ready. Beside them stood fewer than a dozen townsfolk who had chosen courage over fear. Their faces were pale, their hands trembling on their rifles, but their boots dug into the dirt. Her aunt whispered from the doorway, clutching her shawl, "There are too many, child, no wall can hold them." Ayanna didn't move. Walls don't hold men. Truth does. The riders spread in a wide circle, their torches surrounding the farm like a crown of fire. Riggs rode at the front, his bandaged wrist tucked to his side, his face pale but burning with fury. "Look at this," he bellowed, voice carrying over the wind. "The witch and her pets, daring to defy Dry Creek itself. Tonight it ends. Drag her out, and let's be done." His men cheered, but not all with conviction. Some shouted with forced voices, their eyes darting nervously. Others gripped torches tighter, desperate to believe his rage was theirs. Daniel raised his shotgun high. "You'll take her over my dead body." Jonah slammed his hammer into the ground, sparks spitting. "And mine," Caldwell's voice cracked sharp. "Any man who crosses this fence raises his hand against the law itself." Riggs spat into the dirt. "Law? Law's a joke when it bows to her. Tonight we make a new law, one that remembers who owns this land." Ayanna finally spoke, her voice calm and clear. "You've already lost, Riggs. Every time you crawl back to me, the town sees it. Every torch you carry is another shame you cannot burn away." Her words rippled through the line. Some men shifted uneasily, shame flickering in their faces. But Riggs roared louder, drowning their doubt. "She curses us with her tongue! End this now!" The first rider spurred forward, torch raised. Ayanna lifted her rifle and fired. The torch shattered, flames spilling into the dirt. The rider swerved back, shouting. Gunfire erupted, bullets whined through the air, splinters flew from fence posts. Daniel fired both barrels of his shotgun, dropping a horse to its knees. Jonah charged, swinging his hammer at a rider who had dismounted, the clang of iron ringing out like a bell of defiance. The farm became a battlefield. Torches hurled onto the porch, flames licking the wood. Caldwell and his deputies stamped them out with boots while firing into the line. A farmer beside him fell, clutching his chest, but his wife seized his rifle and kept firing, teeth clenched through tears. Riggs pushed through the smoke, revolver in hand. He aimed at Ayanna, his voice a snarl. "You mocked me. You cursed me. Tonight, I end you." Ayanna stepped forward, rifle steady. "No, Riggs. Tonight, you end yourself." She fired, the shot grazing his cheek, spinning his hat into the dust. He reeled, blood streaking down his face. His pride screamed louder than the wound, and with a roar he charged. The clash turned savage. Men grappled in the dirt, torches clattering, fists flying when bullets ran dry. Jonah swung his hammer again and again, each strike echoing like a drum. Daniel fought like a wall, shielding Ayanna's flank, even as his arm bled from a grazing shot. Caldwell's revolver cracked in steady rhythm, his voice hoarse as he barked orders. Through it all, Ayanna stood unyielding, her rifle firing with calm precision. Every shot struck true, not wasted, not wild. She moved as though the chaos around her could not touch her, and that calm, more than her bullets, shook the men who came at her. Some faltered, lowering their torches, shame flooding their faces, but Riggs drove deeper, screaming, "Cowards! She's breaking you! Fight!" He lunged at her, revolver raised again. Jonah leapt between them, hammer crashing into Riggs's side. The rancher staggered, dropping to one knee, but still he clawed forward, hatred dragging him like chains. The square of fire around the farm flickered weaker now. Half of Riggs's men had broken, fleeing into the desert, but the other half fought on, too deep in pride to retreat. Riggs struggled to his feet, bloodied but burning. "This ain't over," he roared. "Not till one of us is dead." Ayanna leveled her rifle, her voice steady as stone. "Then so be it." The battlefield fell silent for a breath, Riggs and Ayanna facing each other across the firelit yard. One would fall, and with them, Dry Creek's fate would be sealed. The night was fire and smoke, but in that one moment everything grew silent. Riggs and Ayanna faced each other across the yard, flames flickering around them. The town's fate balanced on the trigger of a gun. Riggs's chest heaved, his revolver trembling in his hand, blood streaking his face. He spat into the dust, snarling through clenched teeth. "You made me crawl in front of them. You made me bleed. Tonight, I'll take back what you stole. My pride." Ayanna's voice was steady, cutting through the chaos. "Pride is nothing, Riggs. You trade your soul for it, and you've lost twice already. Tonight you'll lose for the last time." He roared and fired. The shot tore through the sleeve of her dress, grazing skin, but she didn't flinch. In the same breath, she fired back, her bullet striking the revolver clean from his hand. The gun spun into the dirt, useless. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Even his own men faltered. But Riggs wasn't finished. He lunged bare-handed, tackling her into the dust. The crowd shouted, surging forward, but Daniel and Caldwell held them back with rifles raised. "Let her finish it," Caldwell barked. Riggs pinned Ayanna down, his hands clawing for her throat, his face twisted with hate, his breath sour with whiskey and blood. "I'll strangle the life out of you, and the town'll thank me for it," her aunt screamed from the porch. Jonah leapt forward, but Ayanna's hand shot up, stopping him with a single glance. Her calm in that moment froze him. With one swift motion, she twisted, driving her knee into Riggs's ribs. He gasped, loosening his grip. She rolled free, grabbing the butt of Jonah's fallen hammer. Rising in one smooth motion, she swung it down, stopping just short of his skull. Riggs froze, eyes wide, the iron a breath from ending him. He waited for the blow, for the death he had earned, but it never came. Ayana's voice cut through the night, sharper than the hammer itself. Killing you would feed your pride. Better you live with what you've lost. Everything. She dropped the hammer into the dust beside him. Riggs tried to rise, but Caldwell was there, revolver pressed to his temple. Enough, Riggs. It's over. This time, even Riggs saw it. His shoulders slumped, his body trembling. For the first time, the fire in his eyes flickered out. The square fell silent. Men who had followed him lowered their torches, shame flooding their faces. Some dropped their weapons. Others turned away, unable to meet Ayana's gaze. The fight drained out of them like water from a cracked jug. Daniel hauled Jonah back, pride shining through the blood and sweat on his face. "You did it," he whispered to Ayana, but she shook her head. "No, Dry Creek did. They chose." Caldwell bound Riggs's hands, dragging him to his knees in the dirt. The sheriff's voice was gravel. "You'll rot in a cell, Tom, and when folks speak your name, it won't be as a rancher. It'll be as the man who bowed to a woman he called weak." The townsfolk gathered, silent, their faces heavy. Mothers held children tighter. Men hung their heads. Women whispered her name with something like reverence. The same mouths that had cursed her now stood in awe of her calm, her strength. Riggs spat one last curse, but it carried no weight. He was dragged off, broken in pride and power. Ayana stood in the yard, rifle still in hand, firelight dancing in her eyes. She looked at the town that had nearly torn itself apart. Her words carried into the silence. "You saw tonight what fear makes of men. It turns you against each other, against truth itself. But fear does not rule me, and it does not have to rule you." Her voice lingered in the night, and for the first time, Dry Creek listened. The flames had died down by morning, leaving blackened soil and broken fences around Ayana's land. The barn had taken the worst of it, one wall charred and sagging, but the house still stood. The garden was trampled, the porch scorched, and yet the farm lived. So did Dry Creek. Caldwell stood at the edge of the property, hat in hand, watching the sheriff's wagon disappear into the horizon with Riggs inside. No one cheered, no one waved. The silence was more respectful than any words could be. Behind him, townsfolk began to gather, not in protest, not in anger, in shame, and in something else too, something closer to recognition. One by one, they approached. A young woman brought seeds and fresh bread. A boy came with nails and a hammer. An old man with shaking hands offered his wheelbarrow and said nothing, but stayed. They didn't apologize. Most of them couldn't find the words, but they worked. And that said enough. Jonah laughed quietly as he helped raise the new fence. "Look at them, acting like they always cared." Ayana wiped sweat from her brow. "They're not acting. They're trying. That's enough." Daniel stood beside her, bandaged arm in a sling. "You know this town. They'll forget tomorrow, or pretend this never happened." She looked him in the eye. "Then I'll remind them, every single day if I have to." Weeks passed. Dry Creek changed, not loudly, not quickly, but it changed. Riggs's land was auctioned off and half of it bought by the town to build a new school, something the women had begged for years. The other half sat unused. No one dared touch it, not yet. The saloon got quieter. The mocking laughter faded. Ayana noticed it when men held the door open for her, not as a show of manners, but out of silent respect. She noticed it when people looked her in the eye, no longer treating her like something foreign. She even noticed it when someone shouted her name from across the street, without venom. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't friendship, but it was no longer war. She sat one afternoon on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills. Her aunt hummed a low song while weaving a new blanket, red and black, the colors of survival. Daniel carved something by the steps. Jonah napped against the porch rail, finally allowing himself to rest. Caldwell approached slowly, holding a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. He didn't answer at first, just watched her open it. It was a petition, 50 names, some shaky, some bold, but all signed beneath the same request. "Let Ayana represent Dry Creek at the Territory Council. Let her speak for us. We trust her." She blinked. "I didn't ask for this," she murmured. "You didn't have to," Caldwell said. "You earned it." She folded the paper carefully, looked out across the valley, where wind blew gently through the tall grass, once soaked in blood. "I'll speak for Dry Creek," she said quietly, "but only if they're ready to listen." He smiled, tipped his hat, and walked back into town. That night, under a sky bursting with stars, Ayanna walked to the edge of the property where the ash still darkened the ground. She knelt, ran her fingers through the dirt, and pressed a single seed into it. Then she whispered, "Grow," because that's what they all had to do now. Not forget, but grow. If this story moved you, let it remind you that pride can destroy, but courage can rebuild. Ayanna didn't fight for revenge. She fought for dignity, for the right to be seen. And in doing so, she changed a town that once tried to erase her. If you believe more people should hear stories like this, stories of quiet strength, of truth that rises through fire, then hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this with someone who needs it. And if you want more tales of resilience and justice in the Old West, don't miss our next video. It's the story of a white cowboy who rescues an Apache girl, but learns too late who she really is. See you there.